Hello and welcome to C-Suite Secrets. I'm Heather Parsons, your host, a serial entrepreneur, fractional CFO, and a business value strategist. I've spent years juggling business and family life while helping entrepreneurs scale, optimize cash flow, and build real financial success. On our show, we bring you real conversations with founders, executives, and operators about what actually moves the needle in business. No fluff, no filler, just smart strategy, systems that work, and insights that you can put to use in your business right away. With that, let's dive right in. Today on our show, we have Matt Schalsey. Matt, welcome.
Hey, how's it going?
Doing good. Thanks. Glad you're here.
Likewise.
So, for those who may not know you, can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and how you become an entrepreneur?
I think I've always been an entrepreneur. I think my whole life. It's funny. My mom's actually staying with us right now, and she was telling stories about me the other day about how I was in kindergarten, kind of selling pencils from the school store and marking them up for a profit. So, it's kind of the start my own business type of venture thing. So, yeah. But what really made me take a bigger leap than selling, resellable pencils was I think just the tenacity of wanting to work for myself, but also tired of trying to fit culture that I believed was right into other companies' cultures and to really bring in a core value to a market and a team that is in desperate need of fixing. So that's why we've created PerfectHire to help really drive and kind of enhance the recruiters' day-to-day operations and efficiencies as well.
I love that. I have a very similar story selling pencils in kindergarten, trying to, make a profit. I
Of course.
love talk, true story, but I love talking to other entrepreneurs who are have always been this way. I
Yeah.
think it takes a lot of tenacity and a lot of grit to stick it out as an entrepreneur, and I love how you're changing the environment as you go. So
Right.
whenever you think about HR and how some of these systems work together, what is the number one thing that you all are trying to change with your new systems and processes?
Yeah, so I think it's kind of twofold, right? So recruiting and HR has always been viewed as like the stepchild of the company or the major cost center of the company, right? Like you got to have it, but nobody wants it because it's always, costing money. There's no transparency into it. There's no, connections across everything. So we're trying to figure out how we make that work. Well, my years in sales enablement, I really found a way to operationalize how sellers are actually moving and connecting the dots throughout their platforms as well too, and doing a really big deep dive and doing a big listening tour with recruiters. I found so many similarities between the two of them that we decided to actually rebuild the entire ATS platform. So ours is an ATS plus. It's enhanced. It's the new next gen of everything, right? But it really does operate more as like a CRM versus a classic ATS, where it's allowing you to input your tasks that you need to have done, have automations that are working in the background where you don't have to set them up. It automatically will just do it for you, providing transparency into the other team members that are in there, not only your boss, but the hiring manager as well too. And then most importantly, we're looking to really draw out like the ROI of a recruiter. So now a recruiter is no longer a cost burden. It's more of an actual revenue generating machine that it ultimately should be.
I love that. And working in enabling areas for the majority of my career, I definitely see the need for that, right?
Yeah.
So salespeople are easy to attach to revenue dollars.
100%.
Yeah. HR, recruiting, accounting,
Yeah.
technology, whatever, not so easy. So, what was the moment that you realized that you wanted to not just sell software, that you really wanted to build it?
I think it was my last company that I was at. I had a failed hiring experience for one of my team members. It was a really, really rough and brutal experience. My recruiter failed me. I'm doing a bigger deep dive, right? I look at it as more of the system that failed me in its sense. And I think it was a little bit of twofold. One, and which was the genesis of this whole project was, the interview questions that were being asked were not relevant to my role. As an enablement professional, there were a lot of people that had no idea what enablement was. They just thought it was sales training. It wasn't this grandiose vision of what my job description actually was. And so we really didn't interview for the right person. And so for me, it was really, how do I start this whole building of just interview questions to have tailored interview questions based off of the job description and the candidate's experience, but also finding out that they're a culture fit along the way. And so we started out just building out this, AI interview question generator and really kind of enhance this. And as we kept getting into it and showing people, they're like, God, I wish you could just like input this into our ATS, but our ATS doesn't even work like something like this. And so it started getting this more and more deep dive. And we were like, okay, we're going to pause production of this. We're going to look into this grand vision of rebuilding an ATS. And I hate saying that we're an ATS because there's a dime a dozen out there. It's just like an LMS, right? Everybody and their mom has an LMS that's out there. And I didn't want to do the same thing. And so we went on a giant listening tour. And what got me going and what has always kind of pushed me as an entrepreneur and as an innovator is listening to people's pain points, right? How and why are they really experiencing this? And, I don't know, for those of you that have seen Scandal, but I'm an Olivia Pope. I'm a fixer. I see a problem. I sadly don't have time to do it, but I do it. And that's where this really landed. And now it's turning into such a huge, amazing machine where people are getting so invested and embedded into not only the culture that we've created, breaking down HR norms, but also more importantly, making their roles and their jobs more efficiently and fun.
That's the goal, right? So
Absolutely.
if you spend the majority of your life working, you ought to at least enjoy it a little bit.
Yes.
So for folks who may not know or understand and be familiar with it, tell us a little bit what an ATS is.
Yeah. So an ATS is an applicant tracking system. So think about it from the start of the candidate perspective. As soon as the candidate hits submit that application, you get all of the candidates all into one platform. Now, if you don't have an ATS, you're probably using a spreadsheet, which also we solve for that problem very easily. But the platform that you have all of those applicants go into, what we're noticing is a lot of those old ancient ones don't have the flexibility to navigate these strange nuanced roles that we're creating, right? And especially in our target area with frontline working or workers, corporate roles hire different than shift workers, right?
Absolutely.
And oftentimes companies that have both of those type of hires, they have to have two different systems. And so they're constantly being mismanaged or managed separately, but equal, but also like not connected at the same time. We're bridging that gap entirely. So it's one system that can optimize for both a corporate entity and role versus a frontline cashier.
I love it. That's great. And I think back on my time in corporate America, and one of the hardest things to do was always calculate headcount. So
100%.
Where do most companies miscalculate headcount from a strategic perspective?
Yeah, so that's actually what we're working on next, which is really exciting.
Love it.
We're actually in the midst of finalizing our proof of concept work right now for a tool called Forecast, which basically will take all of your hiring metrics and productivity metrics. So from Asana or any of your other task-based boards and your CRMs that are calculating what your deal sizes look like. We're building in a large language model that will help your company based off of the trends and growth trajectory that you're trying to hit, help you optimize what that forecasting will actually look like. In return, if you have somebody that puts in their notice, right, we're automatically figuring out what 3 paths do you want to do. Close that role entirely, separate that role and the duties of others, or backfill that role completely. And when you backfill that role completely, you get another option of, do we promote within or do we go ahead and expand from somebody else? And our platform, what that allows you to do is it's a streamlined process that allows you to just navigate that all into one system, which all of the other tools right now, you have to jump between your HRIS system, your task management system. If you've got a like a 15.5 or a Lattice, like employee, measurement system, you have to go into that and then back into your ATS. We're putting all of this into one to integrate forecasting and headcount all into one general platform. And I'd say the biggest thing that people are miscalculating throughout the whole thing is what role is actually needed in order for your company to go ahead and continue to progress. And I think that's the transparency that we're bringing into this is more of, hey, yeah, you think you need another software engineer? You actually need a software QA person or another seller to be able to get this in there faster.
That's one of the questions I get asked all the time is around who to bring in next
Yeah.
and, at what level should I bring these people in?
Yep.
So that's something that's difficult to calculate. It's not, I talk a lot about in accounting, it's not just the science, it's not just the math and the numbers on the paper. There's an art that goes with it as well.
Right.
So we do a lot around vision planning. Where do you want to go in your business? So talk to me a little bit about how all of this ties in, because it's not just numbers in a system.
Yeah. I think a lot of it comes down to recognizing talent as talent. And I think that that's where a lot of companies fall short of is they say, oh, that role is filled, that number is checked, like here is this requisition for our company. And I think where companies are falling short in is they're not recognizing what the capabilities are with their internal teams already and recognizing where their talents are either being stretched thin or not being stretched enough. I can tell you, I've worked with jobs where they're very cushiony and I get a good salary and I did not have to work my 40 hours that week because I knew that it was super easy. Or I've had other jobs where I've worked 80 hours in a week and I was like, hey, this lever is about to break. Like, we've got to do something. And so I think it's understanding where that checks and balances is with your exact team and talent and making sure that you're actually hiring based off of the job description, not off of a short-term goal, but more along the lines of a long-term goal and function as well too.
I love that. And you mentioned something earlier that I also want to touch on. You talked about going on a listening tour,
Yeah.
and that brings me back to what you're also saying here is about talking to your employees and having an environment that's safe enough for them to share what's
Yeah.
actually going on without, fear of something bad happening. I worked with a client not too long ago and the employees never wanted to say anything.
Yeah.
And
Oh
I
yeah.
think that's just as bad as, them rotating in and out all the time because you never know exactly what's happening. But from an ROI perspective, and I look at it from an accounting lens, there's an ROI that's attached to each one of those headcount. And I'm not trying to make it,
100%.
unpersonal because these are people, but I think that ROI is something that we as entrepreneurs really need to dive in on. So I'd love it to hear your insight on return on investment with your hires.
Yeah, I think a lot of companies don't recognize what an ROI for each individual headcount actually is.
Yep.
And one of the things I've stressed with my team personally is you need to put your ROI on your job description internally so I know what I'm getting out of this person. Right? Like, I know what their day-to-day duties are going to be. Yeah, cool. If they're hitting that, that's fine. But I need to know what I'm investing into this role. We do the same thing for any type of contracted work or outside, consultancy hires is what am I getting out of you? Right? I'm not just going to give you $1,000 just to say, hey, here's $1,000. No, I want to know what I'm getting out of it. It better be a lead or it better be three or, whatever it is. But when you're looking at specific roles, sales, whatever, ROI can come from a sales regardless, right?
Easy.
But like for engineering, for example, right? So, we have a goal to launch 2 new modules this year. My engineers, I need to make sure that their ROI is going to be developing a platform that is sustainable and ready to go for us to fully deploy in December. And I think hitting those milestones, knowing that, hey, this employee at this senior level is going to be able to close out roughly 20 tickets a week or a sprint. Yeah, that's an ROI that I can measure. That is a value that I can add going in each of my quarterly plannings and headcount planning to say, yep, this person is good. No, this person is either understretched or not performing well. I need to investigate that a little bit more. Or, hey, this person has not taken a weekend off because they're continuing to be overworked or just want to continue to close tickets.
Yeah. No, I think that's really smart. And beyond that conversation, I think it really does something for the employee whenever they see their ROI attached. It's
Yeah.
not just, I'm not just building widgets here, Tiffany cufflinks, as my husband would say. It's a lot about also that satisfaction of knowing that they're doing something and delivering a value. So how
And
does
that
that play into this situation as well?
Yeah, I think when you're discussing what the impact and the ROI of what your role's particularly going to do, you know you're contributing to the success of that company. And in these bigger companies, right, like it might be harder to have that big of an impact versus the smaller ones, but you know what you're getting when you get into those larger organizations. But these smaller ones, you're able to go ahead and say, hey, look, you did this or I did that. Like that itself is self-rewarding. And oftentimes we've seen it as employees are not asking for raises, or they're not asking for continuous praise or check-ins around like, am I doing okay? If they know that they are providing the impact for XYZ, that is like one of the biggest things that we've seen is the minute that you create a culture of impact, your employees are a lot more happy to be able to continue to drive that forward.
I love it. And I think that's super smart. And you made a differentiation there about, large corporations and how people feel and how it looks there versus in these smaller teams.
Yeah.
As somebody who is bootstrapping in their company, talk a little bit more about how it looks different in these smaller teams.
Well, I'll tell you, funding is a big difference already. No, I think like the biggest thing is right now, right? In the smaller companies, everybody wears multiple hats, right? My chief operating officer is the head of CS. He's also our implementation manager. He's, you know, doing all of our finances and, our corporate stuff that we're doing and hiring. My head of revenue, she's doing anything from prospecting all the way down to client management at the same time. My engineering team, they're doing a little bit of finance work as well too, which is hilarious, but also doing a lot of building and project management and just doing a ton of different nuanced different roles. And myself, right? Like I'm in the engineering side. I'm also in the finance and operations side. I'm also on client calls all the time. Like we all wear multiple hats where these bigger organizations, you have defined swim lanes that you're able to go ahead and stay within and not move outside of. And so I would say, other than knowing what your role is in that bigger one, the smaller companies have a lot more ambiguity for everybody to kind of shift. And, you might be doing this one week, but you might be doing that the next. And that's kind of the fluidity of a startup and somebody that's bootstrapped as well.
I like it, and I know whenever we talked a little bit in the past, you also mentioned that some of these folks are even working pro bono or moonlighting for you.
Yeah.
So how do you protect your culture whenever you know this is not their only gig? And talk a little bit about how the shift in culture, because I see that a lot. People are
Yeah.
not just looking for a 9 to 5 anymore.
No, no. And that's I pride myself in one, I have built up a personal reputation to that people believe that we're gonna get shit done, right? That like that has just been my mantra since day one. People are on board with that. And I'd say like that is where my team really thrives is they do believe in that vision that I don't take no as an answer. I take it as a hey, we gotta pivot and move. So I love that, right? I would say from those that are doing this moonlighting project on us with us right now too is we've talked to them. We want to be able to help give them the experience or help, prove that they can get a raise at their 9 to 5 job as well too. Or eventually, as soon as we secure funding, right, like bring them on board. We want to be able to create an offer letter to have these guys come on and make this their only 9 to 5 as well. But I think the culture is really like very open, very accepting, making sure that you're expressing what talents are. I have probably weekly calls with everybody on the team, if not bi-weekly, to really help break down like where are you struggling? What can I do for you? I end every one of my calls of what do you guys need from me? And it's not necessarily that I can fix it, but is I can find somebody that will help you fix that problem. And then it's also just like being that sounding board, right? And I think a lot of companies in this stage not only are they being a sounding board professionally, but it's also personally at the same time. And, we recognize that. We recognize that you're humans first and that you're not employees first. So I think just having that general human understanding is realistically where we've been able to thrive in our culture.
I love that. And I think that candid conversation and really listening to people goes a long way, because
Yeah.
I know coming from a large corporate environment and moving into working with small business, it's that having a voice that seems to matter to people a lot and being able to feel like they can tell you what's going on and you're going to actually put some effort behind it and help
Yeah.
out, not just make it, I'll get to that when I get to it. So I
Right.
love what you're saying there. You'd also mentioned, raising capital.
Yeah.
So what are investors actually looking for right now in the HR tech space? What have you seen so far?
They need something different, bold and fresh, right? I think investors are sick and tired of, sorry, they're not sick and tired of this. They need to have the word AI basically in there, but they want innovative AI. And when I say that is a lot of these companies that I've seen right now are just slapping like an AI chatbot on there, which chatbots have been around for ages. Like it's
Yep.
just like full on workflow and they call it an AI bot, right? Or hey, we included AI, but you have to either do the prompt or do the searching yourself, right? Our AI model is all on the back end. Like there's no way for you realistically to engage with our AI. And that's on purpose, is because we don't want you to have to focus on the prompt or the search that you're needing to do or whatever. Our AI is constantly working in the background for you. Think about it as like a central nervous system for your entire HR or talent teams. And that's exactly what we're building up into this, is that investors are wanting to see how AI can be utilized without being a chatbot or without slapping this AI sticker on there for a good Boolean search, right? How are we building out a good semantic machine or a predictive machine that is available for, or to work on your behalf? Because a lot of recruiter or a lot of talent teams now are being slashed. And so recruiters are having to do more with less. And so how do we fill that gap to be more of an innovative? And I think, one of the things that I pride myself in is we're done with this, boring, stuffy HR culture. I'm not here for it. And, I'm the F bomb CEO that I will throw those out there in an HR world. And I'm not afraid to, because it's time to loosen up, that feel and be disruptive in the market. And I think that's where a lot of investors have not seen is a new company to bring a new face into this.
I love it. That's great. And I think whenever I think about investing and working with investors, a lot of times they're looking for that balance between vision and proof. So, what's
Yeah.
been your experience with that, and how's that gone so far?
Yeah, vision, they're like, there's no way you can do that. And I'm like, yeah, hold my beer. Like we're pretty much already set. The proof factor is the big differentiator right here, right? Our I think we're in the middle, and we just actually did a workshop on this today, but like who and where is the niche that we are trying to fit in? We have we have good traction right now that we're trying to narrow it down. Like I've got a SaaS platform, I got an events platform, I've got healthcare, I've got food service, I've got, mid market, I've got enterprise, I got an SMB. Like where do I fall into? And I think that right now on the traction side is probably where we are failing the most in an investor's eyes, is we haven't narrowed that down. But the nice thing is all of our enterprise clients that have came to us have inbound to us, which is exciting, right? So as an investor, I would even challenge them, like it's always harder to go upstream than it is downstream.
Right.
And so for us, like if we're having inbound enterprise clients already reach out to us, that's a solid win for us. And then as an investor, you can help expand that tenfold. And I think when it comes down to where we're navigating on the value side of this, we're only going to continue to provide more value as our product enhances and increases in different modules. But I think right now what we've already seen is NPS of our product is already at a 92%. We've already seen efficiency cut down, time to hire right now from 24 down to 6 days. We've been able to go ahead and drive candidate satisfaction in the interview process for transparency and ease of movement from a solid 62% to an 89%. So having these candidates come through and experience this process, as well as the companies being able to manage it, has been a huge success and value and traction for, as these candidates don't get the job, they want to go back because they know that the process was good and they were taken care of.
I love that. I think it's great. And as a hiring manager and somebody who's been on both sides of this process,
Yeah,
those days to get that role filled is excruciating,
it
right?
sucks.
It really does. Because you're sitting there with an open seat and you're like, shit, I'm doing all the work,
Right.
you know, and the people who are applying for the job are also applying for other jobs. So your good candidates sometimes slip through whenever it's 24 days or whatever you mentioned a second ago is fast in the world that I came from. I mean, it could
Oh
be two
yeah.
to 3 months before you get that seat filled if you can find a candidate.
Right.
So I think speeding that up is also a huge benefit from an ROI perspective.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, I would say a big thing, when we're talking about ROI, especially on the recruiting side, right? Recruiters are oftentimes doing time to fill, which is the day that they actually start, and then time to hire, which is the day that they sign the offer letter. For me, I even like to take it a step further, especially in my enablement background, is really time to productivity. Because really, you're still losing revenue up until the point that they're fully ramped up in their role. And so
Right.
the minute that they're not ramped up, you're still down, what? 50% of a head count, 75% of a head count, 25, like you're not fully recovered, even though there's some warm butts in that seat.
Exactly. And like from my role in finance, we don't really track that, right?
Yeah.
We don't track the impact that it has on projects or anything else. So I think that's going to be a great change as this kind of gets out there and people are starting to see these timelines adjust, especially with the AI component and bringing that in a smart way, not just
Yeah.
in a search or other functionality. But I also want to zoom out just a little bit. You mentioned something a minute ago that sparks a question for me. And I've heard you talk about this before around culture, right?
Yeah.
You say a lot of companies talk about culture, but they don't really have it. So,
Yeah.
what's the difference from your seat in HR?
Culture is not a vision of one or a few. Culture is a vision of all. And I think that is the biggest miss, because companies are like, well, I need you to be fun and outgoing and accepting. Or I worked for a company that had gym culture, which was you keep lifting every single day. We don't take breaks and we PR all the time and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, that was done by like 4 people, but I lift differently than others, right? Like I do rest days, I do celebratory PR days, right? Like, no, I don't grind the 24/7 that you're expecting us to do. And I think culture is one of those that, from a company perspective, it needs to be adaptive, but it also needs to be, guardrails of what your core values really come into play and what those are. People aren't going to tolerate, the bossy asshole types that come in here, or, you don't want racists or misogynistic or whatever ist you could throw out there these days, right? Like, you don't want that. But people don't watch out for that all the time. People are not paying attention more to their core values that they should be. They're trying to find this culture fit, which is the culture fit of 5 people that they've established as the new company norm.
That's a great way of explaining it. It's got to fit everybody, and everybody needs to know what it is from my
Yeah.
perspective. And whenever we look at it from a values perspective, how have you seen that shift running your own company versus working for others?
So my company, I didn't want to bring up values until I knew I had a good, solid leadership team. And so for me, I was like, guys, like, these are what I think I would like our values to be. I need you to challenge me. And they're like, well, we like them. I go, no, I need these challenged. And I think that's where, as a leader and as the CEO, I don't see it as like, this is my vision, this is what it's got to be. No, it's a collaborative effort, right? Like we were talking earlier about how do you provide your impact and leave your mark on your company. And I think this is where this values part comes in, is you have to understand what these values are, how they're going to be created, and then how you're going to implement them throughout the rest of the year. I think companies that are failing to acknowledge their value award, or like their values throughout the year, are failing culturally. There was my very first SaaS company that I worked at. Every single quarter, I think it was like 5 or 6 thousand global employees. Every single quarter, they did an all hands where they announced the value award winners. And it was
Wow.
insane. It was insane because you could just see people were trying to strive to that. I want to be recognized. I want to have the trophy. I want to get my name on the plaque, right? But it was also like, that was how people actually communicated and was able to respect one another and really drive productivity almost tenfold. Then I go to another company and they don't even do, they're like, oh, these are our core values, but they never talk about them. And it's like, okay, cool. If you don't talk about them, then they're pointless. Like, there's no point in us driving this forward if we're never going to speak about it. So I think the way you can implement your core values is by building your culture. And by building your culture, you need to implement your core values.
Yeah, that's great. And I love coming back around to that implementation part. So whenever we're talking, I like to get into the tactical side of things. So
Yeah.
not just on the core values, but if there's a founder out there who's listening and hiring feels absolutely chaotic, what are the first three systems that they need to fix first?
Yourself and
Love it.
breathe. Um, I would really, if they're not reporting directly to you, I would sit down with the person that they're going to be directly reporting to and ask them where they truly need the help or why they truly need the help. And then from that part, work with the senior leader that's over that department and really focus in on what is your long term vision? This is where this individual needs help. Is this fitting your vision to grow your team as well too? And not only that, not only are you getting a much clearer job description, but also you're finding a way to hire the next long-term employee, but you're also again allowing your employees to provide impact into the hiring process. You're allowing your senior leader to expedite trust into you by allowing them to create their own vision. And if you don't have any of those other people and you're just trying to fill it yourself as a lead, as the founder, you need to think long term. As a scrappy small business, how many hats does this individual need to wear? How flexible does this person need to be? Can they bend to the point of almost breaking and snap back and be ready to go the next day? I think that there's a lot of nuances that you can do. Every role is always hired differently. Every role should be interviewed differently. I don't think there's a right way. I don't think there's a wrong way. I think there is the way to hire for that role. And that's exactly why we built our own process to help, cater to that world.
I think that's great. And I love what you're saying about the conversation. That's been a strong theme throughout our conversation
Yeah,
today is not operating in a vacuum. So
absolutely.
as somebody who's built a company from the ground up through, working after hours, working on acquisitions, raising capital, what's been the hardest part for you as you've tried to grow your business?
Um, I would say my own personal sanity, to be honest. Um, and I know you're laughing because I know you felt it,
Yeah.
but it truly is like the biggest thing. I've been vulnerable with my team. I've snapped and I've got very angry. I got called out by a couple of my leaders. I've cried in front of my leaders. I could tell you probably at least 3 times I've done that, right? I've cried to my partner. I've, flipped out on my kids. There's a lot of it that in the sanity world that if you don't learn to manage it or you don't learn to provide your own therapy at the same point, right? Like that's where your biggest struggle can be. And so for me as a founder, right, like it's very much finding peers or mentors that one you can, bitch to about all the problems and they can relate to you, or, a mentor that can help guide you through those muddy waters and, get you out on top. So I think the sanity is the big part. I would also say the other big thing is just you have to be a self motivator, a go getter, and it can't just be for yourself, right? Like especially as a founder, you have to do it for everybody, regardless of role, regardless of seniority, regardless of how long they've been there. And so I think that's like the other big part as a founder that
I love
I
that.
really
And I
really
can
aim to
totally
bring
relate.
out.
I do laugh because I understand about the sanity piece, right?
Yeah.
You don't become an entrepreneur and stick with it because it's easy. It's
No.
much easier to have a 9 to 5 job where you collect a paycheck and you know what to expect and everything's not weighing on your back, right?
Yep.
So that responsibility for your team, for your family, it starts to really pile up. So I love
Yeah.
what you're saying and I think it's brilliant. So today's conversation has been awesome. One question I have for you before we wrap up, I'd love
Yeah.
to know what's one secret you wish you would have known starting out as an entrepreneur?
Don't do it.
Don't do it.
Now, one secret. You're gonna get a lot of no's. and I don't handle no's very well. I think that's been the biggest thing, is recognizing what a no could actually mean to you. A lot of no's are never no's. They're just not right nows, or, hey, I want you to rethink something. And I think that is probably the biggest thing, is learn from your no's, or celebrate your no's and learn from your yeses.
I love it. That's some sage advice right there.
There you go.
Well,
Put it
Matt,
on a plaque or something.
right, exactly. No's are hard. That's a difficult thing. That's something that I did not think about as much whenever I started my business, but it's
Yeah.
definitely a part of it. And the more you develop a thick skin, I think the easier business becomes. They're not quite as personal as they were whenever I started out in business, for sure. So,
Yeah.
if our listeners want to learn more about what you're working on or reach out to you, what is the best way for them to connect with you?
Yeah. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I accept every single, invite that comes into my box. I'm very much a community communicator. So connect with me on LinkedIn. If you want to see more about PerfectHire and, optimize your own hiring ways, go to getperfecthire.com, and upper right-hand corner, we have a book a demo button. Get on with my team. Liv is phenomenal. She'll have a great meeting with you. And usually I jump into those as well too.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And thank you to everybody for listening to C-Suite Secrets. If you found today's conversation as valuable as I have, be sure to hit that like and follow button and share with somebody else who's building a business. If you want more tips on how to grow your business between episodes, join us on Facebook at C-Suite Insiders, or find me on Instagram at Heather Parsons Official. Until next time, keep growing. And remember, you don't have to do this alone.